The thing I would like to stress at the beginning is we genuinely, and I mean genuinely, do not have a position on whether HS2 is a good thing or not. What our concern, because I think when everyone's critical in any way, there's a danger you're put in the no camp. We're not. Our concern is value for money and the right appraisal of big projects that take a large sum of taxpayers' money. That's the territory we're coming from. And in a nutshell, what we feel is there's a real danger, if we don't learn the lessons from High Speed 1, that this committee, or a successor to this committee, in 15 to 20 years' time, will be having some of the same conversations about High Speed 2. And that's what we're so keen to see not happen again. And really we see there's three key areas that are major lessons from High Speed 1. One is around passenger demand. The second is around how one values time, and particularly the time of savings of business travellers. And the third is around the wider economic benefits, the very difficult to quantify benefits which range from regeneration to agglomeration in the technical term. And it's really those three areas I'd like to concentrate my remarks on, though there are three other generic areas that might be worth commenting on to do with the costs, the sensitivity analysis, and the evaluation or lack of evaluation on High Speed 1. Well, the first is passenger demand, and as this committee will be aware, the initial, on High Speed 1, passenger demand was overestimated by about 30%. And one of the major factors that happened was that on High Speed 1 was that the demand for near tourism and near travel to the sort of near Europe, in other words, sort of Paris and beyond, didn't grow in the way that was predicted. And as a result, that's had quite major consequences on the financing model and others on High Speed 1. Now, High Speed 2, there's an equal issue around demand, but it's a different issue. High Speed 2, the main competitiveness will be from other rail. And as in High Speed 1, the major factor that will influence demand is the estimates of GDP growth. Now, as the department they themselves say in their April update, they're using still the Office of Budget Responsibility GDP forecasts of a year ago. And when one revises them down, that will affect the project, first of all. But the other thing that will affect, and this is commented on in the Booz and Co. Commentary on High Speed 2, that will affect High Speed 2 is what the government does about other franchises and what other rail companies do about fare structures. And one of the other factors that happened in High Speed 1 was a greater than expected competitive reaction from ferry companies and others. So the demand factor is a combination of what one thinks about on, it's a very complex model, but fundamentally it comes down to what you think's going to happen to GDP and what you think is going to happen and be the competitive reaction from other forms of transport. And we think that there's a real danger at the minute that it's over-optimistic. You're relying from here for another, basically 2060, on GDP figures year on year of over 2%. Now, we all know that hasn't been our historical experience. And if you don't get that, then your benefit-cost ratios are going to drop to very unacceptable levels. And I think the thing just to stress on that to the committee is the benefit-cost ratios already on High Speed 2 have dropped for the Birmingham connection, the first bit of it, down to 1.2 without the wider economic benefits and 1.5 with. And the Y, the extra bit up to Leeds and Manchester, isn't much higher. So already you're looking at an latest assessment from Department of Transport with very low benefit cost ratios, and you put those uncertainties around demand and GDP in, and you could easily be seeing a real problem. That's the first problem. Second problem, which applied to HS1 as well, is the way the department, and this is widespread practice, so it doesn't get picked up in the NAO report, values time and time saving. Basically, it works on the basis that you look particularly at business travellers and you don't count the time spent on a train as productive. So any time saved, because you've got a faster journey, is then valued in at a particular figure. And the other factor here on High Speed 2 is that's valued in at an average of 70,000 per person, which might apply to some business travel, is way above any wage rates of a large portion of the travelling public and the business people. So there's a real problem. Is that the right analysis? And anecdotally, we're going to do a much stronger testing on High Speed 2 and go out to a statistically effective sample of business people to actually look at what they do value. Because anecdotally, they say they value reliability, they value the space to work, they value connectivity, and actually very much value, if one's got the right working conditions and trains are going to arrive on time, the ability to work on the train. So to count it as non-productive and to count then minutes saved in a linear way at £70,000 per business person is, we think, a serious overestimation of the real time savings. And then the third major factor is the one that has bedeviled High Speed 1 as well, which is what value do you put on wider economic benefits? And to cut a very long story short, various studies of high-speed rail in other countries shows a very mixed picture around those wider benefits. They're very difficult to quantify, and we have sympathy on that. But when you look at what's happened in Paris, in France, for example, yes, in some parts, Lille, for example, is quoted as it's benefited from the high-speed rail lines there, but Paris has benefited even more, so the imbalance hasn't changed. If you look at Spain, Madrid has benefited, and there's been severe underutilization of the line. And if you look then at the benefits that are calculated for people like Manchester and Leeds, well, they're growing fast anyway. Would they grow fast without High Speed 2? So the whole way one looks at wider benefits, we've got to be very careful. And even the job creation that's estimated on High Speed 2 is very weighted actually to London. 70% of the jobs that are estimated to be created, this is directly working with the railway, are in London, not in the north. So,
sorry on that, you say jobs directly related to the railway?
Yes, post, not just the construction jobs, but actually created as a result of building a new railway line. The point I'm making is really, it's very, very difficult, and the evidence from other countries, to quantify these wider benefits. And you really have to do it, I think, in the context of an industrial and a regional strategy. So some people say if we build High Speed 2, Cardiff will suffer. So you've got to say are you creating net new benefits, or are you taking from other areas? Are you rebalancing, and what would happen anyway? And the other question, of course, is what might you have done otherwise? Would it be better to do much more on the north-north links, for example, and the areas around Manchester, and to get much better local transport links? Can't answer you that. But one of the things that is a problem on High Speed 2 that wasn't really on High Speed 1 is I think there's been an inadequate real look at the alternatives.